Good morning, everybody. 8th of December, it's a Friday, and another podcast coming your way. What we're going to talk about today, I've got a few things in mind that I want to talk about, but the theme of this podcast today is don't hate the player, hate the game. So what do I mean by that? Just one second, let me just move my microphone just a touch. There we go. That's a little bit better, hopefully. So what do I mean by that? Well, over this last week, my man Jeff over at Clickteam has been working on a little something online using HTML5 for Clickteam Fusion. And what he's done is he's quite genius. The little system that he had in mind, and he opened up Fusion, and he knew in his head how he wanted this system to work. So he jumped into HTML5 and he started putting all the events together and all the whatnots together. And it's certainly been a learning curve for him, but it's also been a bit of a learning curve for everybody involved, because he came across a couple of stumbling points with HTML5, but not necessarily HTML5, with the development overall. And one of the things I want to touch upon is what went down yesterday. I saw in the Clickteam chat that Jeff was still having an issue with one of the ini files that he'd uploaded to his server. And everyone was all over this. Simon, Fernando, everybody was like, trying the best to just figure out what was going on, just to get Jeff back up and running so he could go full steam ahead and crack on with his development. I was busy doing things with the academy at the time as well, but I kept my eyes out, and I was following what was going on, and then it seemed to have plateaued on itself. Jeff asked me to try a couple of things on my server, because maybe it was a server. Now, basically, what the problem was, I'll give you a rundown, is he was trying to retrieve an ini file from his server with the get object in Fusion. Now, we all know it's pretty straightforward. You just get the URL and retrieve the contents of it. Now, the way Jeff's got his system set up is it's quite dynamic, so you don't just load up static file names, it loads up dynamic file names. It's kind of like a lesson builder that he's building online. So rather than code, say, 20 different frames for 20 different lessons, what he's done is he's made kind of like one dynamic frame where he can load up said contents of whichever lesson user is on. So you're basically passing a few variables like the lesson number and steps and all this kind of stuff. So the way he has to generate which file to get is via an expression which includes which lesson number you're on and so forth. So obviously this expression is dynamic; it changes every time. So there was a lot to look at what was going wrong, because when he did the get test, it would work, and then it didn't work, and then it worked, and it didn't work. And what was happening was, the display, when he got the contents of the ini file, he was displaying it in a string, so you could see on the screen exactly what data was being received. Now, it worked, and when he uploaded it, he tested it, and it worked again. It worked in Chrome. Come to Firefox, completely different story. So again, everyone's like, well, we don't understand what's going on now, because it works in Chrome, but it doesn't work in Firefox. What the hell's going on? So I jumps in. Jeff passes me all these files. I said, right, I'll upload it online to my server. We did a few tests back and forth, and voila, it was working. Well, this doesn't make sense. All right, so Jeff sent me over the original ini file. I copied the text, because I accessed the ini file on his server directly, so it's just plain text. So I just copied the text, created the file on my computer, the ini file, and then uploaded that and retrieved the data from it. And it worked fine. It worked fine in Chrome, and it worked fine in Firefox. So I said to Jeff, send me over your lesson data, which includes his ini file, which he created, which has the exact same content as what my ini file had. So he did. He sent me the file over. I uploaded it to my server. Voila. Works in Chrome. Doesn't work in Firefox. What's happening in Firefox is it gets a string, but it doesn't get the text from the ini directly. It was displaying like funky graphics. So there was obviously some kind of corruption going on somewhere. Anyway, long story short, after hours and hours of pondering about what was going on and whether Jeff's server was changing the encoding for the file, and we had to make sure that gzip wasn't enabled, compression wasn't causing the problem. It turns out that Jeff's ini file was set to Unicode for the encoding, whereas my ini file was UTF-8. Now, I'm not going to go into the technicalities of what the differences are, but I'll give it to you in a nutshell. The way data is stored on a computer, there's many different ways that it's stored. There's ANSI, ACS, ASCII, UTF, Unicode. The list goes on and on. Even with Unicode, there's two different variations. You've got Unicode with big endian and Unicode with little endian. You can Google all this stuff up yourself if you need to. But yeah, so what we see on the screen is plain text when we're working with Notepad, when we're working with Microsoft Office, when we're working in Fusion. All the user ever seems to see is just plain text. But as you know, with computers, nothing's ever as straightforward as it seems. And so what I did was I downloaded Jeff's ini file from the server directly, and I opened both my ini file up and Jeff's side by side in Notepad++. Now in Notepad++ it tells you the exact encoding that's used for both files, and when I looked, Jeff's was Unicode with little endian, and mine was UTF-8 without the byte mark. So it was like, so that was the problem. So I sent my ini file over to Jeff uploads, and voila, it works. Now, it's crazy how something like that can stir up so much of a whirlwind, and yet it was something so simple. And it wasn't even Fusion. I mean, the amount of, straight away, when you're using a tool like Fusion, it's surprising how many people straight away think that it's Fusion or it's the Fusion runtime, when as a matter of fact it had nothing to do with that. And I think it's good to bring up topics like this, because I can guarantee you there's probably, I'd say, a good 30-40% of topics on the forum where it's usually user error or something that's not directly related to Fusion. Another example of this is, you probably don't know about this, the audio libraries that Fusion uses to play MP3s, which is lame. Now, there is a threshold at what the minimum is in terms of data to send to play the track. I'm trying to say this in dumbed down terms because not everybody's going to get it. So basically, what happens is if you drop in an MP3 with 128 kilobit rate into Fusion, that's stereo, it's probably going to play. If you drop a 48 kilobit per second mono MP3 in, it's going to play, but it's going to stutter, and it's going to stutter a lot. And this is not anything to do with Fusion. It's all down to the codecs, and it's down to lame, basically. But there's little things like that. So the data that you import into Fusion is not as straightforward as you would imagine. A lot of people have come to terms with PCs and computers, especially in comparison to how many people used them 20 years ago. And people think that they can just drop in image files, just drop in audio files, and just drop in text files, and everything should work. And technically, yes, it should. But there's some things that are out of Fusion's reach that Fusion can't do for you, and that is correct the data that you import. There's been instances in the past of people trying to import corrupted PNGs, JPEG images, MP3 files, OGG files, mod files, and now, as we've seen yesterday, after hours and hours of breaking things down, text files, could you believe it or not? Um, so, I think it's very important that we try and find a way to educate people more on data. You'll have to excuse me if I end up coughing because I've got a really bad flu. I've been down with the flu for the last week, um, and I'm trying to prevent this cough from coming on. But I really wanted to do a podcast today, so I wasn't going to let it get in my way. Um, so if you hear some weird pauses and silences, it's probably because I've muted the mic, because you probably don't want to hear me spluttering all over it. As you can tell, I've got a runny nose as well. It's been really bad. I ended up at the doctor's. It was that bad, and I never go to the doctor's about anything, but I was a little bit apprehensive on this occasion because this came out of nowhere, man. It was like, usually when I get a cough or a cold in the past, it's usually a dry cough. I get over it in a day or two, or it just affects me in the morning, and it phases out by the evening. But this came on all of a sudden out of the blue, man. It just hit me like a rhino in the face. All my sinuses are conjured up, and I'm coughing up stuff, and it was bedlam. So I just made a doctor's appointment, and I felt like I needed to. I felt like I had to because about 15 years ago, when I was 15, one of my friends, he actually died of pneumonia. He actually died of double pneumonia. And nobody knew. Nobody knew. He suffered from asthma for quite a lot of years. He went. This is how weird it is. He went to bed. Winter time. He went to bed with his window open because. I don't know why, but probably because he just wanted some fresh air. And overnight, this is how his pneumonia developed. He was coughing for about a week, but we was always used to him having a bit of a cough because he had asthma. And he was coughing and coughing for maybe a week and a half, and sadly they found him dead. He was only 15. And when they did the autopsy, they revealed it was double pneumonia that he had. So I wanted to err on the side of caution. I use things like that as a little bit, And like I said in the past, if I've had a cold or a cough, you can get over it. When you've got a runny nose or a bunged up sinuses, that's usually a good sign that it's just the cold or it's just a flu. But with me coughing so much stuff up, and I was so tired and drained, I felt I had to go to the doctors. Anyway, I went to the doctors, and she didn't really say much. She gave me a thorough inspection. She said that my ears were all blocked up, and obviously my sinuses were, and all that kind of stuff. So she just basically told me to man up. So I manned up. But I come back. Luckily, I work from the computer, so I can just sit at the desk and get work done. But back on topic. To what I was trying to say, the theme is don't hate the player, hate the game, and the player is Fusion 2.5. There is so many different factors that go into your data before you even import it into Fusion 2.5, and there is so many people that are so quick to blame the tool or blame the developers of the tool, when in actual fact it is the data that they're importing. Now, what I'm trying to say here is, we need some kind of structure developing in the training, whether it's in the academy or anywhere else, where people are taught or educated on, file formats. I feel like it's vital. I mean, if you was going to fire up Visual C++ and start programming natively, you'd have to know about these things. You'd have to know about input and output streams. You'd have to know about streaming files and streaming data. You'd have to know about little endian and big endians and all this kind of and encoding. And you'd have to know about all this stuff. So just because you're using Fusion 2.5, which is a fantastic tool for developing games and apps within minutes, you still have to have an edge about you that knows about data with a computer. Especially if you're going to take this serious, especially if you're going to be developing a serious game or a serious app. You need to square yourself off and think about what you're doing. If you're just making games for fun, or you're not very computer literate, then that's fine. That's if there's a bit of an issue, you're a bit wobbly on, you don't know what's going on, post it on the forum. I'm sure someone will come along and try and help you out, and I will as well, and anyone else from Clickteam will try and help you out. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to go into this using Fusion 2.5 for the long run, and you're going to, you really want to. You really want to develop seriously with it. Like, I'm not talking about just making a living. Maybe you want to get actual serious with your developments. Then I really think if you've not got that literate background of using a computer and file formats and stuff, that you really should look into it. I mean, this kind of stuff is the stuff that I was trial and erroring when I was 13, back in 1998. Before we even had the internet at our house, I was already reverse engineering files and opening files up to see how they were constructed and stuff. So a lot of people kind of skip that stuff today because they don't need trial and error anymore. People go from high school to college. This is how you use Microsoft Word. This is how you use Windows, and then they think they know how to use a computer, and they might be able to navigate around the interface, but they don't actually know what it entails. And I just think it's very important that some people take a step back sometimes. If you've got a problem with your audio, don't blame Fusion straight away. Look at your audio files. Try and figure it out. Try and convert them to different formats. Try different bit rates. Try all sorts. Your images. If your images are a bit wonky, just do something about it with the images first before you blame Fusion. And when it comes to text and data, especially working with servers and the get object, you need to make sure that you trial and error as much as you possibly can before you reach out and start blaming Fusion, because it does waste valuable time. Like, for example, if you're going to use the get object to retrieve an ini file from a server that has SSL on it, and you haven't configured your SSL certificates properly, you're going to get an error back in Fusion on the get object, or you're going to get some random weird data. And straight away, a lot of people will go, and report it to Clickteam as a get object problem, when in matter of fact it was the fact that you haven't set up your SSL certificates properly on your server. So this is what I'm trying to say. If you're going to approach a project, you're going to approach a task, think outside the box first, look outside of Fusion first, and look for help. Don't fear about looking for help in other places. Like, if I have a problem with if I'm building, say, an app in Fusion, and I need to connect with my server, and something goes wrong, then I won't look to any of the guys at Clickteam to help me out on the problem. The first thing I would use is Google. I'd be like, I'd be looking at how connectivity works. I mean, I don't stumble across this problem. This is just a hypothetical situation. Like, pretend something wasn't working the way I expected it to. The first thing I would do is look at Google, look at my server configuration, look at the headers that I'm sending out from the server, look at my htaccess file, look at setting up cores, which is for cross-domain compatibility. All these kind of things, because these kind of things are outside of Clickteam's scope. This is not Clickteam's problem. This is my problem. So I deal with that first. If everything looks in line with that, then I go back to the Fusion project and I test again. And if all else fails, then I will, then it's worth mentioning to Clickteam. Then it's worth saying, hey, I've done this, this doesn't work. Whack it in the bug box, put it on the forums, do whatever you want with it, but just make sure that you take out that little bit of time first, just to look at the outside factors, because the last thing we want to be doing is getting Fernando to waste 4 or 5 hours looking over the get object and testing things when it's not even that. I mean, that's 4 or 5 hours development time, 4 or 5 hours development time that could be spent better elsewhere, whether it's on Fusion 2.5, the HTML5 runtime, which he works on, or the Android exporter. You know what I mean? 4 or 5 hours 4 or 5 hours is a long time. I mean, if it's half a day, it's half a day's work, when in actual fact it could have been something on your server which Fernando can't access, and Fernando doesn't want to access because it's not his problem. His problem is just ensuring that the HTML5 and the Android exporter works, you know, and Fusion works as it should. Anything else external to that is your problem. I'm not saying this from Clickteam's perspective either. I'm not trying to be ruthless and say, you know, don't do this, don't do that. This is coming from me. This is coming from me. These podcasts are my personal podcasts, so this is coming from me. I'm telling you right now that you don't, you know, the help is out there. I mean, even if you don't know anything about this external factor, like you're trying to connect to your server and it's not connecting, put it on the community forums. That's fine. Nobody's saying you can't reach out for help in the Clickteam community. That's what I'm trying to say, is people should just take a step back and realise what Clickteam's responsibility is and what your responsibility is, and it's your project ultimately. Clickteam provide the tool that allows you to develop that project. So yeah, I mean, just honestly, it was great. I mean, yesterday was so crazy. It was like, you know, you've got me, Fernando, and Simon all sat there scratching our heads. I mean, together we have a lot of experience, especially web server experience, so we're all there trying different things, and Simon's trying all these crazy things, and Fernando's scratching his head, and even I'm scratching my head, and it was the final thing that I thought of. I was like, it's got to be something to do with the encoding of the file. So, you know, if we'd have done that at first, we'd have saved a lot of time, and Jeff probably would have saved a few of the last remaining hairs on his head, but unfortunately we didn't. But that's part of the development process, and there's no point looking back and dwindling on it. That was a valuable learning experience for everybody, including myself. You know, I don't look at obstacles like that and think, you know, God damn, I wasted 8 hours doing that. I never think it was a waste. It's never a waste. You are learning all the time. You are always learning, and I think it's great. So listen, no matter how stressed out you get with the project that you're working on, just keep at it, because you are always learning. You are using your brain. You are the one sat at that computer using your brain to think, could it be this, could it be that? You're eliminating things, and that's what trial and error is all about, and that's all part of being a good developer. Some of the projects I've worked on in the past, I have got no help from anybody. I mean, some of the radio station apps that I developed years ago, before even HTML5 exporter came along, you know, I had clients that was like, oh, you know, we need to stream these radio stations direct to natively to mobile, and I'm like, damn, and I had to spend days and days and days researching how I'm going to do this in Fusion 2.5, and you know, and it's great, it's good, it's excellent. I wouldn't change anything that I've done on a computer for the life of me. I'll tell you one thing I would change: all them tutorial header images that I had to spend doing all this week. Nearly 170 images for every single tutorial in the ClickFusion Academy. Man, that was not fun. That was not fun at all. I think I would rather get back with my ex than ever go through that ever again. It was mind-numbing. It was frightening. I lost the will to live so many times, you know, because basically what's happened there is, since for the last, 14, 15 months, I've been developing all these tutorials for the ClickFusion Academy, and just give me 1 second. Okay, we'll try that again. There was a cough coming on there. You didn't want any part of that. So yeah, I've developed all these tutorials up in the system, and they were, well, I think the total count was 174, and I've redesigned the student hub on the ClickFusion Academy. So now, rather than just having a plain text list of all the tutorials that are available for you, it's now a little bit more fancy. It's got like tiles that are really fancy, and you can hover your mouse over and it tells you what tutorial it is. And I thought, damn, I can have images for each tutorial, but the user won't know what the tutorial is unless it has some text on there. So I had to develop an image for every single tutorial with text on there, because the only time the text shows up is when you hover your mouse over it. So unless you hovered your mouse over a particular tile, you weren't going to know what the tutorial was. So I started it, and wow, it was mind-numbing. It probably took me three to 4 minutes per, I'd say 5 minutes per tutorial. So you imagine, I think the total count was about 162, because some of the tutorials I've got to redo anyway. But it was 162. You times that by 5, and you've got a hell of a lot of tasks, minutes on your hand. And it was mind-numbing. It was just so automated, It was like, right, what's the next tutorial? Creating random timers. Oh, damn. What do I do for this one? Right. So I'd have my little template ready, change the name on the text on the template. Then I'd have to get some images that resemble timers. Sometimes I had to mock up an interface in Fusion and screenshot that and put that on. And wow. Anyway, if you're not crying yet, I've got some good news. There's one guy I promoted to the homepage of the community site on Clickteam site on the community. It goes by the name of Rookyard, and he's posted a game, Magical Monsterland. It's a platformer game. I'll tell you something right now. I have seen some magical games being produced with Fusion 2.5, especially graphically, but this is out of this world. I mean, there's a comparison. If you look at Jarvis by Trilly, you'll notice that he uses a lot of lighting effects, and his pixel art is absolutely out of this world, man. I mean, I just wish I had a tenth of the skill that guy does when it comes to drawing. If you look at Magical Monsterland, it doesn't have any lighting effects per se, but it doesn't need any lighting effects because it looks so damn cool. Check it out now. If you go to community.clickteam.com, you'll see it on the homepage. I've listed it. It's called Magical Monsterland, and there's also a demo link. You can download a demo. It's awesome. Check it out, man. Check it out. I don't usually drop many things like this into these podcasts, but I've got to post that. It's phenomenal. It looks really good. I can't wait for him to get this released. But it comes out of nowhere. Some of these developments. We've got some users on the forums that spend years and years and years posting work in progresses and all this kind of stuff. And even after 7 or 8 years, they still don't release anything. And this guy, Rookyard, I think he's got about a handful of posts on the forum, and then he just springs this out of nowhere, and it's fantastic, brilliant. So yeah, definitely worth a check out. What else do I need to cover before I end this podcast? You may notice that the price is different now on the Academy. I felt it was justified for the amount of work that goes into the Academy. I mean, there's a lot goes on. I mean, all jokes aside, I mean, this thing, the Academy, it has so many different aspects to it, that I find myself working on it almost every single day, even if it's just from checking emails and responding to emails and sorting memberships out, all the way to the other end of the scale where I'm spending 12 to 14 hour days producing content, fixing the server, making sure everything runs fast, creating new pages, new marketing material, all this kind of stuff. But there is a couple of things what I'm trying out right now, and if you are an Academy member, I really, really, really want you to go and try it for me. If you go to the Click Fusion Academy website, where are we? In the menu there is a new, you may have seen it, you may have not, it's called Answer Stack. It's in the menu, and it's kind of like Stack Overflow. Now this is available publicly for everybody to see. However, only pro members can post a question. So if you hover over Answer Stack and then click on Go to Stack, you will be taken to the Answer Stack, which it's like a forum, but it's only about problems people have with Fusion. Now this is available for free members as well to post to. So free members can post a question, and pro members can post a question, but guests are free to view the questions and the answers as well. So I'm going to give it a trial run. Let's see how it goes. Hopefully it'll go down well, because then everybody will be able to access this from Google, from the main site. They can do search for it and things like that. And then the other thing what I want to try, which is nothing to do with the Academy, I'm not going to tie this up with the Academy. I'm going to try launching a new marketplace real soon, and this marketplace is going to be for game and app developers to connect with other game and app developers who are also artists, sound engineers, video specialists, all that kind of thing, to try and create like a marketplace community where people know they can go and get X, Y, Z. I'm not going to reveal too much right now, but I probably will in future podcasts because I'm going to start cracking on with this. This is going to be a nice venture for 2018 to coincide with the ClickFusion Academy, but it's not related to the ClickFusion Academy. It's completely separate. It's separate from Clickteam, it's separate from the Academy, it's separate from everything. But yeah, I'll reveal more details about that in due course. I think I've pretty much covered everything I needed to talk about today and get off my chest, alongside all the other stuff I've got to get off my chest with all this coughing. That's pretty much about it. I'm going to do another podcast next week. I'm going to keep you in the loop now until Christmas because there's a few exciting things going down before Christmas. There's a lot of stuff that's going to start unraveling real soon as well too. But thanks for tuning in. I will certainly see you next week. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, I highly recommend that you do, so you'll get instant notification of when the next podcast is available.